Chapter 14, Parables, from Baffled to Fight Better by Oswald Chambers, dated 1917. Job, chapter 26 through 31. Number 1, God and the Solemnities. Job, chapter 26, verse 14. Number 2, God and the Sublimities. Job chapter 27 verses 4 through 6. Number 3, God and the Sublunary. Job chapter 28 verse 28. Number 4, God and the Shadows. Job chapter 29 verse 25. Number 5, God and the Ceruleus. Job chapter 30 verse 8 and through 10. Number 6, God and the Scrupulous. Job chapter 31 verse 5 through 6. A parable is an earthly story which does not explain itself. Every one of us has an earthly story, and the explanation of it is not to be found in its expression, but only in the domain of the designer of the life. Job says that the explanation given by his friends of his earthly story is hopeless. They are nowhere near understanding it. God alone is the source of whom will come the explanation of all he is going through. Number 1, God and the Solemnities. Job chapter 26 verse 14. The sublime things in life swamp our intelligent understanding of them. Ragged mountain scenery, for instance, will awaken a sense of the sublime. The story of the earth itself is so full of sublimities that it requires God, not man, to expound it. The man who has never had the sense of sublime awakened in him is scarcely born. If a man cannot expound the solemnities of life, he need not expect to expound the solemnity of the human soul. The Psalmist in Psalms 139 puts it in this way: God is the God of the early mornings and the late at the night, God of the seas and God of the mountains. These are the solemnities of nature, but the Psalmist implies there are deeper depths in me than these, more mysterious things in my soul than early mornings and sunsets, and I cannot fathom my own way. Therefore, O God, search me. Job is on the same line. Job chapter 5 verse 14. These are but the outskirts of his ways, and how small a whisper do we hear of him. In the book of Job, nature is always referred to as being wild. This is a point of view we have forgotten nowadays. We speak about law and scientific findings. We give scientific explanations of thunder or of a sunset, and have come to the conclusion that there is no unexplained solemnity in nature at all. The wildness of nature has to be recognized. There are forces in the air and sea which baffle attempts at control or of explanation. All we can do is to give a direction of thought along certain lines. The solemnities of nature cannot be explained on the line of reason, but only on the line of a logic, that which goes beyond and underneath the logical. Job realizes this, and he says in effect, if you imagine you can explain the deeper solemnities of a man's soul, you have not pondered human life enough. Number 2, God and the Sublimities. Job chapter 37 verses 4 through 6. God is never sublet in his revelations, but always elemental and simple. The simple gospel does not mean simple to understand, but simple in the way in which God himself is simple. Job says, I have no explanation yet of what I am going through. Your explanation on the line of your creed is irritating nonsense, because it makes you leave out the facts which I know, while you try to explain the one whom none of us can get at, viz. God. Job chapter 5 verse 5 is not spoken in spite but in honesty. Job is saying, If I were to justify you in your explanation, I should have to sin against my own conscience and say that you have told the truth, whilst you have in reality told a lie. There is a difference between the subtlety of Eliphaz and the subtlety of Job. Eliphaz sums up the history of wicked man and says that God does all these things to punish him, whereas Job recognizes the history of wicked man cannot be accounted for on the surface and says that God alone can explain his own dealings. The description Eliphaz gives of the wicked man is a covert condemnation of Job. He takes the facts of Job's life and puts them in as the pictures of a wicked man, while all the time he implies, "Thou art the man." Job says, "This is not the way to comfort me or to bring me any help." Job does not brag and say, "I am a good man." But he does maintain that the reason he suffers is not because he is bad. Job 5 verses 4 through 5. There is a lot of cheap jack talk just now regarding the British Empire, viz. that God is punishing us for our sins. A hopeless misrepresentation, redemption, and Calvary have to do with the sins of the world. If God began to punish the nations for their sins, there would be no nation left on the face of the earth. The line Job takes is the right one, that it is the conflict of wills that produces the difficulties. Job says, you pretend to know the attributes of God to things, but all that you describe as the experience of wicked man, I can give as my experience as a good man. The explanation of Job's suffering was no other than the fact that God and Satan had made his soul a battleground. It was not that Job might be chastised and perfected, but for an ulterior motive which Job did not know, and his institution made him stick to the fact that the one who could explain the solemnities of nature was the one who could explain what he was going through. Though he slay me, though my creed goes, though everything is destroyed, yet I will trust God. Not trust God to deliver me, but trust that God is honorable and just, and that even yet in his human flesh of mine, I shall see in that I was justified in sticking to my faith in his honor, although it looks as though he were deliberately destroying me. The sneer of Satan is that the best man who ever lived did not love God for his own sake, but because God blessed him. And his challenge is, if you will destroy Job's blessings, he will curse you to your face. And Job's blessings were destroyed, and yet Job clings to it. I do not know the reason why I suffer. The reason you give is not the one. God alone can explain it to me, and I will wait for him. This is why God said in the end that Job has spoken the thing that was true of him. Beware of the subtleties which twist the facts. It is possible to torture a man with a delicate type of mind, as in the case of Hugo Bassi, that's Bassi. Torture him not physically, but by suggesting that he had been guilty of base motives and deeds. The sensitiveness of Hugo Bassi's mind was such that after a while he began to believe he had been guilty unconsciously of the things he was accused of. Job's friend said, we have all these facts about you, and they are only explainable along the line that you are a bad man. You may be unconscious of your badness, but you are a hypocrite, because our creed says that if you trust in God, God will bless you, whereas you have been cursed in every way and have lost everything. Therefore, you must be bad. If Job had been of the stamp of Hugo Bassi, with a hypersensitive type of mind and not the robust spirit he was, he would have said, oh well, I must be much worse than I imagined, and I must be guilty. But Job stuck to it. No, I have not been dishonorable and bad. You may say of me what you like, but this is not the reason why I suffer. Neither logic nor science can explain the solemnities of nature. Supposing a scientist with a disease or factory organ says that there is no perfume in a rose, and to prove his statement, he dissects the rose and tabulates every part, and then says, where is the perfume? It is a fiction. I have demonstrated that there is none. There is always one fact more than science cannot explain, and the best thing to do is not to deny it in order to preserve your sanctity, but to say as Job did, no, the one fact more which you cannot explain means that God must step in just there, or there is no explanation to be had. Number 3, God and the sublunary. Job chapter 28, verse 28. Careful examination of every reference that Job makes to geology or meteorology reveals that there is not one significant or insignificant blunder in all he says. Every reference he makes to these matters is the most consummated piece of accuracy. This is passing. Every fact that can be stated by common sense requires something for its explanation which common sense cannot give. The facts of every day and every night reveals things that one's own mind cannot explain. When a man comes across a gap in his scientific explanation, instead of saying, there is no gap here, let him recognize that there is a gap he cannot bridge, and that he must be reverent with what he cannot understand. The tendency is to deny that the fact has any existence just because it cannot be fitted into any explanation as yet. In chapter 28, Job cries out that the prayer is the only way out of these matters. Number 4, God in the shadows. Job chapter 29, verse 25. Right forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. But that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknowns stands God within the shadows, keeping watch upon his own. The shadows, despite what Job is describing, an example of things that are shadowed by mystery in human history and in personal experience. They cannot be explained by reason or by religious creeds, but only by believing God, who will make all plain in his own way. Job is saying here that there is nothing we can reckon on with any certainty in life. We may say that if a man has been well brought up and has developed his integrity and lives rightly, success will be sure to attend him. But we cannot calculate along that line. That the exceptional proves the rule is not true. The exception proves that the rule will not do. The rule is only useful in the greatest number of cases. When scientists treat a thesis on a scientific fact, that means that it is based on the highest degree of probability. There is no such thing as an infallible finding. And the man who bows his head to scientific facts may be as big a fool as the man who refuses to do so. Never ignore the things that cannot be explained. Put them on one side, but remember that they are there and have to be reckoned with. There's a gap in the wilderness and a shadow, and if God does not step in and adjust it all, there is no hope. But God has stepped in by redemption, and our part is to trust confidently in him. Either the pessimist is right when he says that we are autumn leaves driven by the blast of some ultimate power that is without mind, or else the way out is by the redemption of Jesus Christ. The man who prays is the one who ceases to be a fool, whilst the man who refuses to pray is the one who nourishes his life within the walls of his own brain, and he will find no way out that road. Number 5, God in the Surrealists. Job chapter 30, verse 9 through 10. Job is dealing with the moral man-seer side of life, and he says that unless a man gets to God, there is no line of explanation for him. Jesus Christ was in the case he describes in Job chapter 5, verse 11. He was placed along the most sordid immorality of his day, a friend of publicans and sinners, a glutton and winebibbers, and he was put to death with malefactors. It is impossible to calculate on the line that virtue will bring a man to honor, and the uprightness will escape the punishment which falls on men who are not upright. Any explanation at all leaves a gap which cannot be bridged as yet. Eliphaz describes the worst man he can think of, and Job says, all this has happened to me, and you say, I must therefore be a bad man. But I say, I am not. I have the facts, and you have not. You have the logic of your own creed, whilst I have the reality of experience. The God of your creed is one, who would make me an atheist, and the God who will explain my experience I have not found yet. But I am confident that there is such a God, and in the meantime I refuse to accept your counterfeit of him. There are countless experiences like this today. Men are called atheists who are not really atheists. They are rebelling against the presentation of God that is being thrust upon them. If to accept God as he is thus presented means the denial of things he knows to be facts, a man is in a better case who says with Job, I will not accept an exposition of God which makes me call a fact not a fact. Number 6, God and the scrupulous. Job chapter 31, verse 5 through 6. Job examines the statement of the creed and its moral findings, and then disputes it from his own experience. Do you think I am trying to make out before God that I am what I have not been? Would I talk to God with what would be blasphemous insolence if I had not the facts to back it up? The inference from the facts of my life is that I have been beyond reproach, as you know, and in my approach to God, I will not say I have been guilty of what I have not. I have stood clear before God on every one of these lines, and though I do not see him or know him, yet I will stick to it that he is other than you say, and that when I meet him, I will not say I have deceived myself when I told the truth. It is foolish to say that this chapter refers to a past dispensation, that we are in advance of it. We are in another dispensation, but that does not necessarily mean a better one. What man amongst us can come anywhere near the standard of integrity to which Job came up? This kind of statement comes from accepting principles of guidance instead of a personal relationship. If I worship God from fear or superstition, then I have been wrong, and my heart has been secretly enticed. If a man preaches God through superstition, he is guilty of iniquity. God's point of this view is that if I do anything in order to appease God, I am committing iniquity. I mislead myself if I go to church or read my Bible with a superstitious notion. The only reason for my approach to God must be that he is what I believe him to be, a God of honor and justice, not a God of coercive necromancy, who demands that I do things without any reason. Today we are dealing with a thing for which Eliphaz puts Job to pieces. There are people who are saying, we dare not accept the God you are presenting to us because he is not a moral God. There is something wrong in such a presentation. My whole being cries out against it. I cannot go to such a God as a deliverer. Job chapter 31 is the summing up of Job's own life, and God says in the end that Job has not spoken one untrue word of him. If a man talked like that today, we would put him in a pillory as an atheist. In the final run, God will not have us say an untrue thing for his honor. If we imagine that because we walk in the light of conscience or in the conviction we are therefore right, we may find that we may be as far wrong as Saul of Tarsus was. In these chapters, Job is pointing out that God must be other than his former creed says he is, and the creed must acknowledge that there are facts it has not taken into account. Thank God for theology, but theology is second, not first. And if we make it first, we will do what Job's friends did, refuse to look at facts and become consistent to certain ideas which pervert the character of God. End of chapter 14.